Great. Well, thank you, Rachel. That was a tremendous documentary. Let me just start with the most obvious question, which is, why did you make it?
I'm going to try to answer this briefly, because it's actually a bit of a long story. I made a film. The film I made before this one, also for Frontline, was called A Hidden Life, and it was the story of the mayor of Spokane, Washington, who was a conservative Republican guy named Jim West. And in the middle of his term, he was outed by his local newspaper, who had secretly hired a computer expert, technology expert, to pose as a 17-year-old boy on gay.com, where he snagged the mayor, who was hanging out on gay.com having a long conversation, sort of elongated conversation with what he thought was a young man. Turned out the young man didn't exist. They never met. And the film sort of looked at a lot of things, but one of the things that I was left with after making the film was how I didn't think that West would have ever said the things he said online in person. It wasn't as though what they found online was a direct mirror of actually what the guy was. It was almost as if a chemistry had happened, where online he felt free saying things that he never would have felt free saying. And simultaneously, I heard a story actually about my nephew. Online, on the Frontline website, I call this the nephew of a friend because I didn't want to put it out there. But it is actually my nephew, who is an extremely lovely, bright, responsible, politically correct 13-year-old. And his mother, who's my sister-in-law, told me that she had gotten a call. He's also very close to his parents, but she'd gotten a call from a friend of hers who said, "Do you know about your son's blog?" She had no idea he had a blog. She was told by her friend that he had made some statements on the blog that were racially offensive. And again, this is the last kid in the world you would ever expect to do this. And when his parents sat him down to talk about it, he admitted it. And he said, you know, it's not me. It's like I was trying on something. It was like I was playing a game. And of course, he had no idea what it meant to say these things, and that he could have been suspended from school for the things that he said online. And his parents talked to him. He was mortified. He took it all off. But it really made me think, these two incidents made me think a lot about, at a time in adolescence when kids are playing with identity, trying on identity, discovering identity, how the internet can kind of intersect with that experience in both positive and negative ways. So that's sort of what got me interested in looking at the subject.
Yeah, it's fascinating because Sarah, the girl with the eating disorders, actually said that she was for real online, but she wasn't in her day-to-day life. Is that how you found her?
You know, I think it's complicated. I think in Sarah's case, I think that's the way she experienced it. Actually, I think Sarah is a very responsible kid. She's a good kid. Once this came out, she took all the right steps. She's in treatment. She's talking to her parents. I think she is the good girl she imagines, and she's also the other girl that she imagines. But she certainly felt uninhibited online in a way that she didn't in the rest of her life.
And what about Autumn Meadows? Because she really seemed to be inhabiting this other self online, and yet she somehow, through her parents, managed to integrate that. How did you find her?
How did we find her, or how did
No, I mean, sorry. I mean,
how did we experience her?
Yeah.
There, I think it's actually very interesting with Autumn, because she really was a kid. She was a very troubled kid. We didn't go into a whole lot of detail in the show about this, but she was a kid who was really at risk in all sorts of ways. And the internet and the community that she built online and the identity she built online, the affirmation she got, really did help her in the end. And I think it allowed her to express a side of herself that she didn't feel she could express at school, and wasn't able to express at school. She was in a very, conventional environment in which the kind of art that she created wasn't accepted. And so while there obviously are all sorts of issues about the appropriateness of what she was doing, the picture she was taking, there was a way in which emotionally I think she was benefiting from that experience. And I think her parents, as she got older and got more mature, her parents were able to see that. And that was very positive for her family. They're very close.
All right, so I'm a parent of a 22-year-old who won't let me onto her Facebook account. I'm also 22. Exactly, but I also have a 12-year-old who wants a Facebook account, and I'm currently saying no. And luckily, they have a rule saying you have to be 14, so I can at least hide behind that for a couple of years. I believe you're a parent. Is that true?
I am. I have 3 children.
All right, and we saw a range of parents, shall we call it, up on in the documentary. Some who perhaps did better than others. What is it? What would make up an ideal parent, or at least a good enough parent, in these days, these online days?
Well, first of all, we have to let go of ideal, because that's good enough is about all where any of us are going to be in this new world we're living in. So, and I certainly want to say that I am far from the parent I'd like to be when it comes to this stuff. It's really challenging. You know, I think the ideal parent, just for as an exercise, is somebody who gets in on the ground floor with their kid, who when their kid discovers the internet with their kid. I think that's really important because kids do discover the internet at an age when they're still open to their parents, when we still have access to them, when we can still teach them a civic culture online. And I think too often, because what I know, my oldest child is 10, so I'm at this point, which is one of the reasons I'm thinking about this now. It's tempting not to get that involved because most of what 10-year-olds do online is not terribly dangerous. It's playing with computers, maybe a little IMing, but basically it's just games. It's tempting to just say they'll be fine and get involved when they get older. But I think now's the moment. I think an ideal parent is a parent who learns it with their kid, much as they're learning a new language, the way their kids are learning it, so that when their kids do get to the rocky adolescent years, they can speak the language. They're not as intimidated by it as most of us are. And then I think, unfortunately, there's no shortcut to this, but I think it's really about general good parenting. It's teaching your kids judgment, it's teaching them morals, it's teaching them to be good people online and offline. And I don't think kids are, generally speaking, transformed by the internet. They are who they are offline and online. And if you're a good parent offline, if you have, a dialogue with your children, I think that will generally carry into the online world as well.
Yeah, I found myself cheering for Cam, for instance, at one point, while at the same time kind of sympathizing with his mother, too. How did you find them? I mean, that must have been a tricky thing to have a TV crew in their kitchen.
Not as much as you'd think. I mean, I think they were actually, I was surprised that they were as open as they were. I think it's interesting what you say about the mother. She's gotten a bit of flack after the episode. I think there were a lot of people who thought she was, ridiculous. Others who supported her, of course. But I do think there's a piece of Evan Skinner in all of us. I think that we all have that fear for our children and that intense desire to protect them. She certainly did carry it to an extreme, and I think she alienated her son in the process, and I think that's a word of caution to all of us about their need for privacy, particularly today when kids have so few places to go to be alone, to be with their peers. It isn't like it used to be. They're so overscheduled. They have so little time to just hang out that the internet is a very important place for them, and they need to have a sense of privacy. So I think, that's one thing to take away from that story, is that if you alienate your child, they're not going to tell you anything. On the other hand, I think putting the computer in the kitchen isn't a bad idea at all. As a matter of fact, I have decided that, haven't done it yet, but we're going to put one computer in a central area of the house for our kids to share, even though they would like to have laptops and I'm sure, have privacy. At least when they're in middle school, I think there's a big difference between middle school and high school students, which is something we can talk about later. But I do really think that middle school is a particularly tender time, and privacy online is something that's a lot more questionable in middle school than in high school.
Right. So let me move that on to the issue of anonymity on the internet. Now, anonymity is that extraordinary sort of quality of the net that doesn't exist in a room like this. We cannot look. I mean, the lack of anonymity is astonishing. We're actually putting our names here. I know who you are. You know who I am. But the very fact that I don't know that it could be Vint trying to fly on Second Life, or some of the things that occur, creates a different dynamic. Now, we're in Washington, so let's get a little political for a moment. There's a new task force that has been created. A number of us are actually sitting on it. The state attorney generals have asked MySpace and the rest of the industry to look at the issues of age verification and identity authentication. Some attorney generals would actually like to see that you have to be 16 to go onto MySpace. And that basically we should lose anonymity entirely from the internet. What do you feel about that?
That's such a tough one. I mean, my first take is it seems so unrealistic. It seems so impossible given